Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. It's time for Tuesday Takes with Tre'Shon Diaz. He is at Tre'Shon. I'm Kevin at Falcoholic. Kevin, we are here to bring you the deep dive, the film review, the nuanced takes, or just the really angry takes, depending on the week. But this week, we're going to try to be nuanced. We're going to try to get into a lot of stuff. Main takeaway from this game, it's the headline. The Falcons offense coming into form carries the day because the defense, outside of some heroics from Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell, really struggled. I mean, I don't know if you agree, Tre'Shon, but I think this was by far the worst game that we've seen from the defense in 2024.
Yeah. Man, I don't know if it's the worst for me, but it's definitely, towards the bottom of performances for them this year. And, you have to take into account, the situation when you look at the injuries and everything else that the Buccaneers were dealing with. Atlanta was dealing with a couple of their own, but, when a team's missing their best two wide receivers, you would expect a little bit of a better performance. And, I actually had to rewatch everything because I was stuck on a plane for most of it, had to live through the tweets. I appreciate everybody that was keeping me informed of what was going on. But yeah, after running it back, getting to watch everything, was not too happy with the defense overall.
Yeah, it was a tough watch. I mean, I think I said it that this defense makes me physically ill, and I was feeling ill at points during this game. And we'll get into it. The Bucs, for all that they were down in terms of their weapons, I think it's pretty clear this is going to be one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. Their offensive line is playing phenomenal football. They have three good running backs. Bucky Irving looks totally legit. And props to Liam Cohen for really trying to lean on that, because the Falcons don't stop the run well. They just do not. And that was one of the biggest parts of why they struggled so much in this game. They also didn't cover particularly well for large portions either. But, when you can't stop the run against a team like the Bucs, it has to pivot to the run game. It creates a lot of problems, and we already know this team can't rush the passer. So, they got to figure something out. Like, if, maybe committing more to just loading up the box and making it harder to run or something. But frustrating watch defensively. But for all the bad that we saw from the defense, the offense had arguably their best game or close to it. Kyle Pitts, National Tight Ends Day, surge. Outside of that, maybe fumble. I personally think it was a fumble, but who am I to argue with the officials in this spot? But good, obviously fantastic plays from Kyle Pitts in this one. He's approaching the top of the league in yardage now for tight ends, and couldn't be coming at a better time. The run game's finally starting to get more consistently good. And this is one of those defenses that with Vita Vea in there, this is a very different, Bucs front than we're used to. But ultimately, the Falcons offense was good enough to overcome some very poor defensive play, and we're going to dive into that and sort of where the Falcons stand at this point in the season. 5-3, a lot of things going in their favor in terms of records, and NFC as a whole looking kind of vulnerable. So potentially a year for Atlanta to make a push. We are going to get to that in detail in just a second, guys. Before that, I'm going to bring you a real quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. The Hawks appear to be playing well. We'll get Adnan's take on that on Wednesday's show. Tune in for the Hawks check-in. But from opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, BetOnline's got you covered. The best odds, biggest promotions, and even live in-game betting on all your favorite teams this season. Every game matters, and BetOnline's got every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline's got odds on everything. They've got NFL, MLB playoffs, college football, NHL, political props, everything that you could think of. They've got it, and you only got one more week to take advantage of those political props if you're a true DGen. So get in on that if that's your game. No matter what you want to bet on, folks, head to that website today, betonline.ag, to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Tre'Shon. Well, a lot to cover today. I'm glad you got a chance to catch up on the game. I feel like it was probably better to not watch it live, because it was one of those where it's like you could just feel like after that safety, I was like, oh no. Oh no, this is how you die. This is the end. But thankfully, this team has actually not blown it most of the time. And so I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with them closing out games. They've kind of made a habit of it. Kirk Cousins, that seems to be his thing over the last several years of his career. But where do you want to start with this one? You want to go offense, defense, anything in particular you want to touch on?
Yeah, I don't think I really have anything in particular. We can talk about the defense. What was funny for me, rewatching it and seeing the first two plays of the game, I was like, oh, this kind of just like encapsulates the entire, event. You start off and the defensive line just gets absolutely blown off the ball, easy 8 yards, and I'm just like, okay, it's gonna be one of those games. Very next play, Jesse Bates just kind of shows us all why he needs to be in Defensive Player of the Year talks. Those are going to start heating up, and he definitely needs to be firmly in those conversations. He comes in and forces a fumble and bails everybody out. And after going through the film, that just kind of seemed like the theme of the day. The defense would get the ball easily moved on them, and for the first half, Bucs were putting up points. But then, AJ Terrell gets his second interception. He has his first multi-interception season since the All-Pro 2021 year. And then Jesse Bates gets 3 turnovers for the game to go with, his namesake, the third. So love seeing the stars and the big contract guys step up because that's what they're paid for. That's why you give out those big deals. But, overall, we're just not seeing Jimmy Lake do anything different. And yeah, it's frustrating. We finally saw Richie Grant get some snaps. And, as somebody who's been pounding the table for Richie Grant snaps, I just want to say I never wanted to see it like this. I did not want to see Richie back at safety next to Bates or anything. I just wanted to see him play some big nickel, just a little bit of big nickel. But, it didn't have that option today. Simmons was down, so they had to play Grant as a safety, and he hasn't played there all year. And it just looked like I don't even know if regress is the right word, but it's just the same issues that we've seen from Richie, third different defensive staff, fourth year here. There's just been no growth, and he's just legitimately unplayable in most scenarios. So, it was tough watching the linebacker play as well, because that's something else that we've kind of discussed where we're not seeing improvement, but Landman just does not look healthy.
He's not. Yeah, it's bad.
It's frustrating. Like,
Yeah.
like going through it, I didn't see anybody mention it, but like when I get to the end of the game, why is he out there on coverage still? Like, it feels like we're not learning our lessons. Like, and that's what's really frustrating. Like, there's no reason for Nate Landman to be in on a 1-minute drive where the Buccaneers are throwing it every single down. If you need to have a second linebacker out there, that's why you drafted Bertrand. He was brought here so that he could fill in these coverage reps, because that was Nate's weakness last year, and it's been Nate and Ellis's weakness this entire year. So I just don't understand, when we look at some of these personnel usages and we look at kind of the way that the defenders are getting deployed, we're still seeing the same mistakes, and we're still kind of getting the same results, which is, offenses are really able to do whatever they want. We've been very fortunate to get a little bit more stiff with points in the second half, but it's not due to anything with defensive scheme or adjustments. I keep seeing this. They're making great adjustments. They're not adjusting a thing. They're not changing a thing. It is the same exact defense. It is the same exact calls. You're just seeing guys step up and make better plays in those crunch moments, which, again, not going to complain about that. We love seeing that, but we'd also like to see them not have to get put in a position where their back is up against the wall, and that's the only way they can keep themselves in the game.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great that they're not allowing points in the second half, but it's purely coincidental. Like, it's not due to any changes. Like, I think early in the season you could be like, oh, maybe there's some adjustments happening, but I think at this point, there's not. Like, they're not really changing anything. They're just getting fortunate turnovers. And like, that's great. Like, I'm not going to complain about getting turnovers. Like, that's wonderful. But turnovers are statistically one of the least predictable and least consistent things in the NFL. Like, and there's a lot of correlations between defenses that have a bunch of turnovers one year are very unlikely to be as good. They're in line for big regression the next year. It's just statistics. Turnovers are typically not a reliable defensive stat. So I agree with you. Like, the thought that, like, oh, the defense is better in the second half because they create turnovers, like, which is what's happening. It's not anything schematically different. That's not sustainable. That's not a sign of good defense. It's like results over process is basically what I fear we're seeing, and it's like the process is still bad. Like, and I know, like, I think at this point I've got big beef with Jimmy Lake because I don't feel like this scheme is helping anyone. Like, I think it's making everyone look worse. And it's just you look at this defense last year with Ryan Nielsen, and it's like Nielsen in Jacksonville's not exactly having a great campaign either. But one thing that Nielsen did was he was like, look, he was able to get a good to even like near great run defense out of basically the same personnel. The main difference being Calais Campbell, who was a huge, obviously, part of that. But and obviously there's a big reason why this defensive line is far worse than last year, and it's because instead of Calais Campbell they got Matt Judon, and Matt Judon is a gigantic bust. Like, I mean, just absolutely nothing there. Which they pinned basically their entire pass rush on Matthew Judon coming in to save them, and the opposite has happened. He's almost like, I mean,
they don't even ask him to rush.
No,
like on the Alfred goal line, on the touchdown at the end there, where Otten gets his second, and it's like right by Alfred. They drop Judon into coverage. Like, they don't even ask him to rush in the red zone anymore, and so it's just kind of like, man, like, it just seems like they're just have kind of like given up on that working out.
Yeah. So that, I mean, and again, we've talked about this. Like, I think Judon was the right call. He was the best of the available options. And it just didn't work out. And sometimes that happens. Like, you're going to, like, to use a D&D analogy, good, bad rolls happen to good people, and it's, sometimes you roll a 1, and they rolled a 1 on the Judon acquisition. That's just how it goes sometimes. But, and it's also, again, like, that's part of the problem with pinning all your hopes on a 33-year-old edge rusher is like, what if he falls off a cliff? What if he gets hurt again? What do we do? And obviously it's kind of a perfect storm of, like, I think they hoped Braylon Trice would be able to contribute. I think a lot of people think that they wouldn't have traded for Judon if Trice hadn't got hurt. I think they still would have traded for Judon, like, personally. I don't think they were planning to not make any moves at pass rusher. It seems like maybe it was a coincidence that Trice got hurt, or where they felt like, okay, we have to get this done right now. But I still think they would have done that. But yeah, I mean, it's so hard to evaluate. Like, the scheme has clear issues in some spots. Like you said, the end of, like, obvious passing situations, 2-minute drills. Like, there's absolutely no reason to play nickel. Like, there's no reason to have linebackers on the field. I mean, maybe if you had a great, like a Fred Warner that you never take off the field, okay, sure. Yeah, I get it. Caden Ellis and Nate Landman in his current state are not Fred Warner. Like, maybe Troy Anderson, you would say, like, we want him to spy the QB or something. Like, okay, I get that. Troy Anderson's not out there. Like, but to play 2 linebackers, one of which clearly can't move backwards, and even has trouble moving forwards at sometimes, like, I agree with your take. Like, he doesn't hit with any power right now. Like, it's like, this man is hurting. Like, they even pulled him out of the game at one point. Like, we can't keep doing that. But it's just like, the scheme is not helping. And, like, you can blame the lack of pass rush. You can blame, whoever you want, like the linebacker play, the interior defensive line not living up to their, to what we expect. But, like, ultimately, you can't blame the personnel for the decisions that not Ryan Nielsen, Jimmy Lake is making in these obvious situations where, like, you just need to have different personnel on the field, like a simple personnel swap. Like, why would you? And, like, I know we've talked about, like, oh, well, maybe they should play 3 safeties. We know why they're not playing 3 safeties, because Richie Grant's a liability. play extra corners. Put Clark Phillips out there. You're giving him snaps as a starter. Like, maybe your dime should be Clark Phillips, not a third safety. I mean, I get it. Like, you want more beef out there because you can't stop the run. But if they want to run the football in a 2-minute drill, you let them run the football. Like, if you can get them to run the football, great. Like that, they're just burning 15 seconds or a timeout every time they do it. Like, there's no reason to fear the run in that 2-minute drill. It just stuff like that where it's like there's not really any justification for that personnel. That's the most frustrating thing because like this zone defense is gonna look awful with no pass rush. Like that's kind of the Achilles heel of this whole cover 3 thing, and that's why Quinn's defense in Atlanta never took off. Is because they were insistent on this cover 3, like, all this stuff, and this defense, needs that elite pressure with 4 to really work. And they never got even close to that, and the defense became horrible. And that's what we're seeing right now. Like, you're not getting any pressure. You're not really putting any pressure on these receivers, and like quarterbacks are just carving up the holes in the zone because they have infinite time to throw the football. And you're just depending on your elite secondary players to come up with turnovers to save you. Because in this game, I mean, they were about to give up 2 touchdowns before those interceptions. Like, I mean, the Bucs were marching on both drives. There was very little resistance. They got those clutch turnovers, but like that's not a sustainable strategy. Like, just pray Jesse Bates or AJ Terrell or Mike Hughes or whoever can make a miraculous pick to stop an opposing drive. That's not good defense. That's a prayer, and maybe this team is blessed, right? Maybe we're going to get some prayers this year, which, I mean, we do deserve some, frankly, but I just don't see how that is a winning formula long term. I mean, maybe I'm a hater, but I don't see how you can have the defense playing like this and win football games long term, even with the offense playing as good as it is.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because we talk about Judon, and obviously we're disappointed and everything. He still leads the team in sacks, like
with 1.5. Yeah.
And even if you added 5 sacks to Judon's total, and he had 6.5, the Falcons still only have 11 sacks for the entire season through 8 games. D. Alford has more sacks than Caden Ellis. We're just not. This is just a really bad defense, like in terms of like pass rush personnel, and I've got to put a lot of that on Terry. Like, Lake obviously needs to kind of understand that, like, hey, and Raheem, like, by extension, because like the two are connected. Raheem's a defensive minded head coach. This is his buddy that he had as his analyst last year and with the Rams when he was the DC. So like they're going to be connected, and we kind of have to start putting some of this on Raheem as well, because he's just letting it happen. But they definitely need to adjust because, like you said, they don't have the pass rush, and they don't have the pass rush because Terry Fontenot bet on a Matthew Judon acquisition, and then Braylon Trice. Those were your biggest edge acquisitions this offseason. Like, you had James Smith-Williams, who's like been a plus addition, doing much better than we expected. He's got his first sack of the year last game, like before against Seattle. But other than that, we didn't make any big moves. Bud Dupree was a bigger loss than people wanted to admit. They kind of looked the other way at that. Like, him and Calais Campbell leaving was a lot of sacks. Like, there was about 8 or 9. And so, like, the addition of Judon, you were hoping could just fill those 9 sacks on his own because you needed everybody else to come up, and we're not getting any of that, unfortunately, right now. So, we didn't really put together a great group, and we didn't really put together, the personnel that we would need to run the defense the way we're running it at the current rate we are. Like, I understand, like, everybody's running a lot of cover 3 right now, but we're just not really mixing it up as well as other teams are either. We're running everything. We're running cover 3 out of nickel the entire time. We're not seeing it from dime. We're not seeing it from base. We're not seeing it in any other scenario. So exactly what's going to happen when you prepare for this Falcons defense. And you don't really have to worry about too much because they make it very simple for you as an offense when you have to come into this game. And you see that when you play a team like Tampa, who's missing their 2 top wideouts, and they still don't have any issue moving the ball because they can just eat in the underneath. So I think it's, it's just really frustrating to see how the pass rush has been managed over the years. And it's not yielding the results. Like, it's unfortunate. We talked about it. The Judon trade, good process, bad result. Right now with the defense, we're seeing good result, bad process. And we're just not really getting the returns that we had hoped for. And we're not really putting the guys in the best position at this point for them to be able to kind of just take some pressure off themselves. At one point this year, the defense was on the field a lot because of the offense. The defense is now on the field a lot because of the defense. If you're giving up a 97-yard drive, you can't blame the offense for scoring too quickly before that. That happened early in the game. Everybody's fresh. Guys have their energy level up. Like, that is like your own undoing. And so now you just let them go 97 yards. And if the Falcons offense does respond quickly, yeah, you're going to be more tired because you just let yourself sit on the field for that long drive. So we're getting to the point here to where, we're starting to see the team kind of level out and who they are and what their weaknesses are. And the defense is, like, by and large, the main weakness of this Falcons team. The offense has done a really good job of adjusting and getting better week by week. And we're just kind of seeing the defense, make it happen, which, again, we love seeing turnovers. That's just not a sustainable metric to rely on and to fall back on week over week if you're not getting improvement or growth in other places. Obviously, like, Troy Anderson is clearly the linebacker that's best suited for this scheme. I think that's very clear. Troy, I do think, was a little bit out of scheme previously playing with Nielsen last year. And I think that it's been a growing and learning experience for him, but his athletic ability and the way he can flow through and to the ball is definitely tailor-made for this. It is not made for Nate Landman. Caden Ellis is clearly out of position. So now we're going to have to look at, we need edges, we need linebackers. They're going to need a lot of different things when they look ahead this offseason, which I think raises a question about some conversations we've seen appearing on the TL. What is this Falcons team? Is this Falcons team a rebuilding team that's ahead of schedule? Is it a team that they were expecting to, hold on while they're able to put other pieces together? Or is it something else? So, I'm curious on what your opinion is, Kevin, in regards to, like, what are the Falcons like from a, overview, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is this was my take in the offseason too, I think this is a team that wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to build this team for a 2026 window with Michael Penix as their quarterback. And they also understood, I think correctly, that this fan base would not tolerate another, like, all-out rebuild. Like, they would not tolerate a teardown. They would not tolerate more losing seasons. Like, I mean, you were there. Fans were apathetic last year. Like, I mean, it was like no one gave a shit by the time we got to week 10. It was like, oh, same old Falcons. This team is not good. Like, Desmond Ritter's not saving us. Taylor Heineke's not saving us. This offense is basically unwatchable. The run game inexplicably sucks, despite adding Bijan Robinson. Like, that, that was just the Arthur Smith Falcons. They inspired no love or loyalty, to take a quote from Game of Thrones there. But, it's this team is rebuilding. Like, honestly, they are, but they're also trying to put a winning product on the field at the same time, and that's a difficult needle to thread, right? And that's there. For every action, there's a reaction. It's true in physics, it's true in politics, it's true in every aspect of life and energy and matter in the universe. And when you take a quarterback with your premium pick, that was the pick. If they wanted to be the best team they could be this year, they needed to take a pass rusher there. There's no doubt about it. And whether that's, my guy, Jared Verse, who I think I correctly pegged as edge one at this point, just saying. I also really liked Laiatu. Latu would have been happy with that pick. That seems to be where they were leaning. if they wanted this pass rush to have a chance, I think they would have had to do that plus Judon or another move or whatever, to give this pass rush a chance. Without that move, they decide to go with Michael Penix, and then they decide to trade up for Rook Aurora, which I hate the trade up. I do like Rook. I think he's a very fascinating, potential future, very good defensive lineman, but raw pass rusher, good run defender. But like, again, you trade up, he's more of a future focused pick. And like, even more of your picks are guys that you're not likely to see. Like, Zion Lowe didn't even make the roster. And like, Braden Dorless has still not been activated. So like, the entire draft for the most part, outside of Braylon Trice, who unfortunately tears his ACL in training, in preseason training camp, like, this whole draft class was not for this year. So, and Penix obviously is the biggest sign that this team is trying to build for the future. But then you go out and sign Kirk Cousins, and it's like, that's not for the future. That's for right now. So they're really trying to do both. And obviously the Judon trade was a sign, and the Simmons signing was a sign that they're trying to also win now. So they're trying to have both. And we won't be able to, like, we're still like in the middle of this to see if this was the right strategy or not. And we probably won't know ultimately, like, even if they, like, obviously if they win the Super Bowl this year, then we'll have no question that this was the right strategy. It's like, oh, great. That it doesn't matter what happens next. But, I don't think they're winning the Super Bowl. I think maybe they could win a playoff game depending on who they go up against. And I would be happy with that, but we're not going to know, like, if this rebuild was successful or if they played this year correctly until we see Michael Penix take the field. And I mean, given the way this quarterback class is shaping up for 2025, I can't say I disagree with the decision to take a quarterback last year. Like, this quarterback class is not very good, and they were going to be picking towards the end of the first round. Or, I mean, I think at worst, this team is picking in the teens. Like, they're not picking 8 again. I think it's pretty clear at this point. But, I mean, they're going to be picking at the end of the round, and, like, how many first-round quarterbacks even are in this class? Like, Sanders? I mean, who else,
Ward,
right?
maybe? Ward, yeah.
Maybe? But it's like,
Tough.
so I think it's like, yeah, you passed on a pass rusher that you desperately needed, and the defense is going to suffer for it. But if Michael Penix is the future at quarterback, it doesn't really matter that you had a worse defense for a year if you get your franchise quarterback. If Michael Penix sucks or doesn't become a franchise quarterback, then it looks like a complete failure. But again, we're not really going to be able to evaluate that for at least 2 more years, I would say. So at this point, it's sort of like, can you thread the needle? I think if they can make the playoffs, win a playoff game, look competent, the rest of the way, I think it's, I would say, like, they did thread the needle effectively. My worry is, like, this NFC is, like, wide open this year. And if they had really gone in and, like, maximized this season or the next 2 years with Kirk Cousins, this team maybe could have been a Super Bowl contender, but we just won't know. Like, we'll never know now what could have been. So my worry is they get to the doorstep and just can't do it because the pass rush sucks. And it's like the defense keeps them from being a Super Bowl contender when they could have potentially contended with Kirk Cousins. And obviously that will be problematic, but we got a long way to go before we can answer any of those questions. It's why it's an interesting discussion. But I mean, you look at the roster and the setup for next season, and like, they're going to be saying goodbye to a lot of these guys. Like, even if they were playing great this year, they were going to have to say goodbye to a lot of these guys. Onyemata seems destined to be cut. Same with Caden Ellis. Grady Jarrett, they're going to have to do something with his deal. He's $20 million against the cap next year. So maybe it's a cut. Maybe it's a pay cut. Maybe it's an extension of some kind. I mean, who knows? But, and those are just 3. We haven't even talked about Caleb McGarry. Like, they're in a place where they're going to have to reboot this roster next year. And maybe that'll be a good thing. If these guys are underperforming, you're like, you just take the cap savings and move on. But, yeah, it really does feel like they're kind of in this no man's land right now, and we won't really know if it was smart or not smart for like at least until the end of this year. I mean, we're kind of still in the feeling it out area. What do you think though about where they're at? Yeah.
I don't think they're a rebuilding team. I think it's very interesting just kind of looking at everything kind of just through the first 8 games. It's very clear that they looked very hard at this upcoming quarterback class. Yeah. And I think Terry went back and remembered the first draft with Arthur Smith. and they had the chance to take one of the top QBs of that draft. And the QB that they most likely would have had taken would have been Justin Fields. And I understand what Justin Fields is now and how everything turned out. But, situations matter. Would have been a completely different one for him. He's with Matt Ryan. Who knows what happens? But they don't go that route. They decide to wait. They want to just, hold on for another year. They don't need to get Matt's replacement just yet. They'll be able to do that next year. There's QBs every draft. Turns out they waited to draft in what was the worst quarterback draft, probably of the 2000s. Honestly,
Malik Willis will save us. Don't worry.
I think it was it's the worst quarterback of the 2000s. They took their QB of the future in the third round. And so Terry, I think, was like, I'm not doing this again. We're not going to just, bank on Kirk. This is a 3-year timeline. Max, we're thinking we know it's 4-year deal, but whatever. We have to be ready. And so I think going after Penix, I think that is a much better process now than how it was viewed originally. Even if it doesn't work out, I think it's going to be kind of hard to fault them. And obviously this is, again, like you said, going to depend on how some things play out over the next couple of years, especially with this QB class that we're all deeming right now as terrible, because who knows, maybe something changes when they become pros, but it's not really looking like it's going to work out for too many teams. But when I look at that move and then I kind of examine everything else, okay, they bring in Darnell Mooney. That might be the best value signing free agent across the league at this point, based on just Mooney's play and where he's likely to finish here as a receiver. They make some other moves. You see them acquire Judon. You see them, put some other players together, and it's kind of seems like, hey, this is definitely enough for this team to win. We feel like we've built a team that can get us 10 wins, that can get us into the playoffs. They didn't make big swings, like you said, to get into the Super Bowl. I think that's when you don't take Penix, right? That's when you do go after one of those edges. Maybe you make aggressive calls to Cincinnati in the summer when you hear Hendrickson wants out and you make them an offer they can't refuse. Who knows what the options are, how things could have played out, but they played out the way they played out. And so I think Atlanta is kind of like what you're saying, trying to have their cake and eat it too, which pretty much was the Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot plan. They just pushed off getting the QB a year, but they were still trying to do the same thing. We kind of have to be honest about where Matt was at that point in his career, and the realistic timeline he had left to be able to get this team into the playoffs and make a push for the Super Bowl. And so I think Terry's just kind of had deja vu, and he just went just a slightly different route this time, but also focused a little bit more, I think, on the offensive weapons. Getting Mooney was a must. You don't make that move, this team is in dire situation, I think. I couldn't imagine this offense without Darnell Mooney in it. It just wouldn't go. It just isn't gonna. It's just not doing the things that they're able to do now with him gone. So I think that, they weren't pushing for a Super Bowl, but when I think of rebuilding teams, I don't necessarily see this one as a team that's in rebuilding mode. They are in renovation mode. They're setting themselves up so that they can put, together a good product year over year. And I think they're trying to, establish a new way of team building that some others have had success with, but we haven't seen many teams be able to actually replicate and be able to, pull off year over year. And if they're able to get this transition at quarterback down, then everything else works itself out. Because at the end of the day, it's if you don't have a franchise QB, it doesn't matter what else you have on the roster. Falcons learned that lesson the hard way. And so, when we look at the offense, which, we'll get into now, for the good stuff, it's all worked out really well on that side of the ball. And they do deserve some credit for at least putting a product on the field from that standpoint that is going to keep them in most games. And they'll still trip up like they did against Seattle, but you're definitely not worried about that unit the way we're worried about this defense week in and week out.
Yeah. And I think everything bad that we're saying about the defense, I feel like it's the reverse for the offense. And I think I'm upset about the state of the defense. Everyone is, obviously. It's just tough to watch, but they made the right call going in on the offense because that was something that they could actually fix. Like, I'm not sure, like, if they go all in on fixing the defense and just kind of let the offense stay where it is, that you're anywhere near as good. And look, the right call is always to invest in offense because offense is king. The rule book's designed to cater to the offense. The NFL loves offense. Like, that's just the way it is. Offense is king, and the offense can carry a bad defense. We've seen this happen all the time. You almost never see a defense carry a bad offense. It just doesn't work long term. Because sooner or later you'll come up against a team that has a really good offense, and even a great defense just can't hold down a great offense in today's NFL. It just doesn't. It's not sustainable. So, this offense is legit. Like, I mean, I think the offensive line is in good shape. I mean, I think when they get Drew Dalman back, like that's the piece now. Like we've seen Matthew Bergeron, I think, ascend. And that's exactly what we were hoping for, right? Looking for Bergeron to take that next step. I think he really has. And Ryan Newsel, God bless him, he's held the fort as a pass protector. Like that's really all you can ask. He's not a good run blocker, but like he has held the fort as a pass protector. And like that's really all we could ask from him. Serviceable backup center. Happy with that. But you look at this offensive line, it's good. Darnell Mooney has been everything you could have hoped for. He and Kirk just have a really good connection. And I love the play. Like Kirk misses him, the first time he goes deep to the end zone. He just, underthrows him. And Mooney still had a chance at it, but that's not great. You make him slow down where he destroyed Tyreek. Tyreek Funderburk got benched at halftime from what Darnell Mooney was doing to him. And like, then Kirk's like, nah, Mooney, I got you. We're going to do this again. It's almost the same play, it feels like. Goes back out there. Absolute laser from Kirk Cousins this time. He doesn't miss twice. And beautiful touchdown. And, they just have a great connection. Kyle Pitts, again, I just feel like everything that we've been saying, like the offense has been iterating and improving and making tweaks, getting these guys involved that were struggling early, fixing their issues. Kirk has been improving. Like the defense just isn't doing that. Like the defense is stagnating and the offense is rising up as Falcons do, as Samuel Jackson would say. But and they're going to have to, like this offense is going to have to keep ascending to hold up this defense because they're going to have to play some good offenses and like they're going to have to win shootouts and that's what they're going to have to do. And like so far they've shown an ability, except against Seattle, to win these shootouts. And as long as the offensive line can hold up and keep Kirk clean, you feel pretty confident about his ability with these receiving options to do that. But the defense makes me very concerned. But when you've got Kyle Pitts, like this is what we were hoping to see for years. It was like you get Drake London, and this is a game where Drake London really doesn't have a huge role because the Bucs one good secondary player outside of Anton Winfield. Zion McCollum is basically just shadowing Drake London the whole game. And Zion McCollum, to his credit, has looked like a CB1 this year. Like he's playing good football. Drake still gets 4 catches and helps move the chains, but the Falcons basically just sacrificed Drake London on Zion McCollum. They're like, okay, that's fine because we've got Darnell Mooney, we've got Kyle Pitts, we've got Ray, and we've got Bijan Robinson. Like we don't like if you're gonna sacrifice your best player in coverage to try to take away Drake London, that's okay. In years past, when teams sold out to stop Drake, the Falcons had no other answers in the passing game, and that's why this team is so much better as a passing offense. They have answers. They have answers for different coverages. They have answers to defeat teams that have bad linebacker or safety play. They have options to go after bad corners. They can go. I think now they're really starting to be able to take advantage of bad run defense. And I think that will be critical in a couple of these matchups. Games like, the Broncos, great pass defense, not as good of a run defense. That might be your saving grace to get past Denver, is that you can run the ball on them. Same thing with the Giants. Pretty, a great pass rush, but they can't stop the run for shit. So it's like, if you can just pound the rock, you can beat them. And the Falcons offense, I think, is going to end up being able to do basically what they need to do to attack a variety of opponents. the issue is if they come up against a really good defense that also has a good offense, aka the Lions or like some of these playoff caliber teams, I think that's the teams they're going to get their ass kicked by, because this defense just isn't good enough. And if the opposing defense can slow down this offense, like the offense has an off day like we saw against Seattle, or just, they have a great defense, like the Falcons I think are going to really struggle to beat those teams. But that just might be the ceiling of this team, is like you can't really fix this defense. They can win shootouts, they can get to the playoffs. They're like, I mean, at this point they're in prime position to just take over the NFC South. I think the Bucs are, I think this was like the last gasp of the Bucs, honestly. Like that defense is really putrid. Like, I mean, for everything bad we say about this Falcons defense, that Bucs defense is worse. And
it's
that
also
offense
getting
can't.
worse by the week.
It is, and that offense can't carry that team now. Without those receivers, like, I know they looked passable against the Falcons, but against anyone with a semi-competent defense, they're going to have a really hard time. And they could go down 2 more games over the next 2 weeks. If the Falcons can win the next 2, the Cowboys game, it's not going to be a pushover. This Dallas team is very dysfunctional, but you never know.
Dalvin Cook and Zeke, man. they can't run as fast as they used to, but they will run through some of these tackles. If
they're gonna have to figure something out,
the holes open up like they have been, they're definitely going to be able to hit them. Like, I'm a little worried that people are kind of like, oh, Dallas, like, whatever. I'm like, look, man, that team, depending on how they want to play, whenever they want to show up, they will give you a fight and they can compete with you. So. Yeah.
We're praying for the dysfunction. We're praying for the dysfunction. Because that's like, I feel like honestly that team should be better. Like, they're just so dysfunctional that, like, I don't know if they just hate each other or like they hate the coach, or like I'm not sure.
They hate everybody. Trayvon Diggs is arguing with reporters post game. After checking for tweets and stuff. It's just not. So like the vibes are just
really bad there. So that's my hope, is that like the vibes bring down the Cowboys more than the Falcons defense does. But man, and then you get the Saints, who are just dead in the water. That team is putrid.
They're benching Rattler now at this point. Like,
Ritter, Rattler. Jake Haener. Well, going to Jake Haener,
I don't know, but like, let's talk about the offense, because we haven't really gotten into their day, and
this is the positive part of the show. Now we get to heap praise on the offense.
Kirk Cousins, certified Buccaneer killer.
Love to see it.
It's kind of nuts, man. Has I think like 800 yards basically against the Buccaneers this year. It was like something like 8 touchdowns, 1 interception.
Yep.
I mean, sweep the defending champs, first year here, and that's really like what you wanted. Like, you brought Kirk Cousins in to take care of this division. Like, I think first and foremost, the Falcons, like you've pointed out, like the NFC as a whole is a weak point, but the NFC South definitely had like the most room. Like, a surprise, for the 5th year in a row, it was the most up in the air division in the NFC. And like, they were like, okay, like, we, no matter what, like, we're bringing in Kirk because we have to win this division. Like, we have to be able to take care of stuff at home first, and then we can look at the bigger picture. And I think like they nailed it. We're 4-0 in the division. Kirk has dismantled, the team that has won 3 years in a row. And I mean, there's something special about seeing him get that 13-yard run in week 8, knowing that he tore his Achilles in week 8 last year. It's just kind of one of those special moments that like you can't believe happens. And like, that's the most hilarious run like ever. I'm so happy that he was able to get the first, where I watched that on the replay and I saw the 2 linebackers like in the middle. I was like, oh no, oh no. But hey, he was able to make a move and fall for the first down. And like, that's just kind of the story of Kirk's season, is like perseverance. We've seen him grow week by week, get more comfortable in the offense, shake off the rust. He's got his laser back. Like, we were a little bit worried there at the beginning of the season if he was going to be able to have the ability to drive the football. And it's like the first one you saw was that FU ball to Mooney against the Buccaneers in the first go round. where he just throws it to the top of throws it to the top shelf, and Mooney goes up and grabs it. And then, like you said yesterday, we see him come back. The throw to Pitts on his second touchdown was a laser in a tight window. Pitts was able to corral that and like not break stride. You saw the Mooney pass. Like, Kirk has gotten so much better as the season has gone on, and he's definitely like solidified. Like, at worst, he is, what his contract says he is, which is the 14th highest paid QB in the NFL. Like, I think people need to realize that too. Like, people are getting so hung up on that $100 million guarantee figure, where it's like, you need to go look at the by year, and Kirk Cousins per year is ranked 14th. So everybody should be happy what they're getting from him. And then obviously what he has pulled out of the rest of the guys on the team. Like, Kyle Pitts is back. Like, he's probably as back as he's going to be, especially in this offense. He hasn't had less than 65 yards since laying an egg against the Saints. And he gets screwed out of a touchdown the week before against Kansas City, where he had 59 yards and should have gotten that PI at the very least. And with a better throw, he's getting a touchdown. Pitts is going off. London's going off. London doesn't get to go off, like you said yesterday. Doesn't matter. Kirk's able to get the ball to Mooney. Kirk's able to get the ball to Ray. Bijan's able to do his thing out of the backfield. Algier, I think that's like the only bad game, like true bad game I think I've ever seen him have. So like, we're it's mulligan, whatever. Like, we have two great running backs. That's a problem that we can afford to have if one of them is having an off day. We've seen Algier step up when it's not Bijan's day. And so, you just really love what the Falcons have done on offense. I know that Zach Robinson's screen pass game is definitely driving people a little crazy. In my opinion, on the rewatch, like, the egregious call was like the back-to-back ones to start to have. It was like, all right. But the one after those is a touchdown.
Yeah.
If we get a block thrown, like, they're not terrible. They just need to get dialed in a little bit more. But like, he's growing. He's getting this is so much, like, in terms of like as rookie as it can get for an offensive coordinator, this is pretty much the peak. It doesn't really matter that he worked under Sean McVay, like, or worked for PFF before that. He hardly has any experience. Like, he was obviously a plus starter as a college quarterback, much better than people give him credit for at Oklahoma State. Those were some tough teams. The Sam Bradford years, OU. He competed Vince Young. Like, those are some crazy teams. This is like Big 12 at its peak. He's in there making Oklahoma State an 8-win team. It's enough for the Oklahoma State propaganda. But we're watching him get better. And like, Sark didn't even look this good, like, as a play caller his first year. And like, Sark ran an entire program at USC and was calling plays for years before that. So one, like, props to Raheem for like taking this gamble and betting on this and being like, hey, I remember Atlanta letting other guys like Zach Robinson leave the building and watched them go on to have success. He saw Matt LaFleur leave. He saw Mike McDaniels leave. He saw this happen. He's like, I'm going to take this bet, and like, it might not work out, or it might take some time, but like, I think Z-Rob is ahead of schedule. Like, I think people have definitely been critical of him, and like, I get it. It's because, like we've said, this offense is loaded with talent, and like, we like what it has and what we've seen from them, but he's getting more out of it than Arthur Smith ever did. Look at how many points this team is scoring right now. Yeah, Smith didn't have Kirk. I get it. And that's obviously the biggest difference. But when you look at play design, when you look at personnel usage, when you look at the creativity factor, Z-Rob has it, man. And like, I feel good about having him for this year and next year. But if the growth continues, and if this is what his, and if he stays on track and we get into next year and it's just like this and then even better, like, we may only have him for 2 years. So really like what we're getting out of the offense right now. And yesterday they just did a really good job of responding. They didn't respond as well against Seattle. We saw them get in their own way. There's still been some penalties, that have kind of upset the flow at times. Thought they did a much better job of minimizing that yesterday. And they took care of business, and they weren't worried about what was happening on the other side of the ball. It didn't matter. They just did their job, and they won. And I feel like if the Falcons offense, in 90% of cases, if they do their job, this team is going to win. And that isn't a feeling we've truly had since, the peak of the Matt Ryan era. Like, that was the last time where you felt like, hey, like, you know what, regardless, if offense goes out there and does what we know they can do, we're good. And, that's a great feeling to have. And like I said, we just really haven't had that in such a long time.
Yeah, it is a great feeling to have. And Zach Robinson in what, 8 games with Atlanta has put up 30 plus points 3 times already and approaching 40 on 2 of those occasions. Arthur Smith in 3 seasons, including one with Matt Ryan, put up 30 points 4 times total. That's like, 45-ish games?
Yeah.
Zach Robinson's already almost matched that. And I don't think it'll be long until he gets that 4th one. So, and like, it's like, yeah, Arthur Smith didn't get a quarterback after Matt Ryan, but that's his fault. Like, he chose not to prioritize the position. Like, I don't believe, like, I don't think it was Fontenot. Fontenot, like, was very open to getting Kirk Cousins and even drafting a quarterback. I don't think this is like a Fontenot thing that he didn't want to draft a quarterback. So,
yeah, no, I agree. I think you look at the moves that they've made, like we just talked about it. They're double dipping. It's clear that, like, Terry, obviously, and when we look at that first year, I feel like it definitely gets lost on the fact that, like, Terry came in late. He didn't really get a true full off season. So, like, Smith had the keys pretty much all to himself in that first year for the draft. So, yeah, like you said, like, you can't just eliminate that part from the process, and that Arthur Smith set himself up that way.
Yeah. And, I like it. Like, we've seen, I mean, Arthur Smith, like, we're not going to keep ragging on him forever. We'll probably continue to do it this year, but it's just like, it was so obvious, like, the passing game, he just didn't get it, really. The route combinations, the spacing, like, these are critical parts of an NFL passing game that he just never really grasped. He also just didn't value the receiver position. It was weird.
He never even hired a passing game coordinator. No. He clearly didn't think it mattered.
Yeah. And it's night and day. Like, I mean, just watch, like, just pop on the all 22 and just watch. There's guys getting open for the Falcons almost every play. Like, the passing concepts are on point. It's really just, it's like, Arthur Smith never really provided that for Ritter. So it's like, well, if you gave Ritter these wide open receivers, maybe he would have looked semi-competent. But it was the perfect storm of this passing offense is not well coordinated, not well schemed, and Ritter's just probably a below average quarterback in the NFL. Shout out to him for getting back on an active roster with the Raiders, by the way. Best of luck. It's still got, still a young player, still got potential to be a backup in this league for sure. But it's just night and day. And you also like to see the run game has continued to evolve, which Arthur Smith was this run game guru who never evolved his run game. And Zach Robinson has evolved the run game. I mean, they're running more inside. They're mixing in some different types of plays. I love the I forget what they were calling it on the broadcast, but basically, like, the momentum blocks that, like, Charlie Warner was hitting, when he goes into motion.
Yeah, the split zone duo and everything that they've been doing with Warner has, like, really started to pay off, and I'm glad he's leaned into that more.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, it's come at the cost of Ray McLeod a little bit, but it's like, Ray McLeod is a competent receiver, and it's probable that we'll need him to step up into, like, a role at some point if somebody has to miss snaps, but, like, at this stage, the run game is such a big part, and, like, Kyle Pitts has taken on a much bigger role. So it's like, maybe you can afford to have 2 tight ends out there. Maybe you can, not have to have that slot receiver out there every play. And this I think this offense just has a lot of options now. They have a lot of ways they can attack. They can go run heavy. They can go 3 wide receivers and air it out. They can attack your linebackers. They can attack your safeties. They can attack your corners. They can attack zone coverage. I mean, Kirk is just just destroyed that Bucs zone defense. And like it's the same reason that the Bucs were destroying the Falcons defense. The space is there every time. He just has to hit it. And, to his credit, bounced back from a tough game against Seattle where he just looked off all day, just a little bit off. And that's the difference between beautiful touchdowns and crushing picks in the NFL. Yeah, I mean, you love to see it. The offense is exciting. And again, as frustrated as I am about the defense and the cap that probably puts on this team's potential, offense is the way to go. If you have to pick one, you pick offense every time. And that's just the way it is in the NFL. And if this offense can continue to ascend, I mean, right now they're unquestionably a top 10 offense. I think they're 7th now or something like that.
Yeah, they're top 10 for sure.
Like if you can continue to ascend, you can if you can become a top 5 offense or better, you can overcome a bad defense and make the playoffs and potentially make noise. It just depends on the matchups. But it seems like I mean, whether you call it a rebuild or a retooling or a reimagining or whatever, they're clearly, this is a transitional year for this team where they're going from this Nielsen scheme and some of these veteran players where they're probably going to do some kind of offseason reimagining of this defense in particular. But the offense is like in place. I mean, right tackle is probably the one spot you look at like where you're thinking that maybe they're going to have to do something there, because not that McGarry's been having a bad year or anything, but he's making a lot of money. The pass protection is problematic. He's still a good run blocker, but that position takes on such an added importance with Penix taking over in the next 2 years. So you wonder if, my concern is that this team has 4 draft picks right now, and people are wondering why the Falcons aren't making any big trades. It's like they have 4 draft picks. They've got their first, they've got their second, they've got their fourth, and then they have, I think, a 6th from the Rams or something like that. And that's it. Like, that's all they've got. They got 4 picks. So, like, they don't exactly have a lot of ammunition. They don't really have a lot of opportunities to fix any roster issues through the draft. This is probably going to be that tighten the belt year. But, like, the offense is in place. Like, these guys are all signed. Maybe Kyle Pitts, if you have to have him play on the 5th-year option, you can. The receivers are all here. The offensive line is pretty much set up. Drew Dahlman's the one, I guess, free agent question mark you have. But the offense is pretty much set up, and you could just go kind of clear the decks on defense and try to bring in some new faces if you want. But, they're on track, I think, to this goal of winning this year, which it looks like they're winning right now. If they carry this over the rest of the way, they'll finish, roughly 10-7, 11-6, depending on how things shake out. That I think we would all take that at this point.
That was my predict. 10-7 was
exactly.
Take it. I'll take 10-7 all day. I'll take 4-0 in the division all day. Yeah. And we're 5-3 right now. So it's like, like we've discussed, and I think like, and I think you're like me. It's like the big reason where it's like, where we are kind of sounding harsh is because like we do believe in this team's ability to like get in the playoffs, and if you can get in, anything can happen. And like what we're just wanting to see is the defense improve enough to the point where you don't feel like you're getting in and getting kicked out in that wild card, but then maybe you get past that wild card and you can get the division game. And then maybe if you get past that division game, you could get to the NFC conference game. And like, that's where like the like criticism is, that's what it's rooted in, is the fact that like we see what this team can be. And it's like you said, when we kicked it off, the NFC is open right now. We're tied with the best division in the NFC with 5-1. And obviously we are 1-1 outside of the division. And we've had a big, heavy, like serving of 4 straight division games. And we get our 5th in 2 weeks. But if you beat the Cowboys, you're 2-1 outside of the division and 6-1, like in the entire conference. That's huge. Like we're the third, we're third, like we're fighting for the bye. And so like we want to stay there. And if we want to be able to do that, it's kind of like what we've been saying. We just need to see the defense kind of take these next steps. We have recognized that they can only do so much with the personnel they have on the pass rush, but we're still not seeing them bust out the creativity and kind of get out of their shell and start doing some things to adjust to the fact that they don't have the horses they need to run the amount of cover 3 they want to run.
Yeah, like and that's the thing. Like with the offense taking over the heavy lifting on this team, this is the time to get more aggressive, to try some new things, because you can't just keep doing what you're doing. It's not going to work. Like we've seen it, and maybe that means you play more heavy base defense, and you just decide like we can't rush the passer. Maybe we can stop the run. Maybe we can just stop the run. Eddie Goldman is playing well. Like, he only played 8 snaps against the Bucs. This was a run-heavy attack. And, like, obviously, I think Trey Anderson is just such a linchpin to this whole thing, which is, like, in the preseason and in the offseason, it was like, I really thought he was the X factor, for this defense. And hopefully he can come back this week and be that X factor that they desperately need at that linebacker spot. But, Bertrand, I thought, he's okay. And again, like, he can actually run. Like, and it's like, I love Nate Landman. He needs to get healthy. Like, we know what he is when he's healthy. He can't move. So, like,
can't be healthy if you're making him take 53 snaps and keeping him on the field in coverage.
I know that's the number on the back of his jersey, but like, we don't have to play him that many snaps. It's not required. But it's just like, Bertrand is not a liability. He's not an impact player at this point, but like, if Landman can't move, you have to put Bertrand in. Like, I get that they like want Landman out there, and he's, when he's healthy, he's going to be a core part of your run defense. But right now, he can't move, and that just teams are going to go after him relentlessly now that they can see that he needs to rest. Give him some time to rehab, man. Give him a week off. Get Bertrand. I think if Anderson can get out there, like, there wouldn't be any question about Landman being on the field. But they trust him so much, and I think he's a warrior. He's going to want to get out there, but it's problematic. But like, you can't be a bad run defense and be a terrible pass rush. So if they can't fix the pass rush, if they could at least patch up the run game to some extent, I think that would be a worthy compromise. And like, maybe it's still not great defense overall, but you look at the yards per carry allowed by this Falcons defense, they're 12th. They're only allowing 4.4, but like, it's just the defense as a whole just struggles so much because they do allow, they don't allow this huge yards per carry number, but they just allow consistent gains that set up consistent third and shorts, and then the pass rush can't get them off the field. So, this team can compete. Like, they right now they are leading the NFC South. I don't think this is like a fraudulent 5-3, but I think some people are just kind of buying into the hype a little too much because this is the first winning football we've seen in Atlanta in like 7 years. And people are like, oh, well, we should just like enjoy it and all that. And it's like, I want to enjoy it, but like, I also want to, recognize that this team like has a ways to go before they're a legit contender. And it's not to say they can't do it this year, but they're going to have to get creative on defense. They're going to have to make changes. And the offense is going to have to keep humming because right now the defense is a huge problem. So obviously the hope is that this team can do that. They can patch up some defensive issues, find a way maybe to slow down the opponent's run game at the very least. And then the offense can kind of take over. Because, they don't exactly play a murderer's row of defenses. Like, they just don't. Like, the Cowboys defense is nowhere near what they should be. And maybe they get some guys back this week. But, who was it? George Kittle was open every play. Like, you watched, he was just wide open. So I was like, all right, Kyle, go run that over route and just eat,
Oh, man.
Just run that dig. Yep. Hit that dig,
I'm excited.
Kyle. The Saints are just not. That team is, I think, about to collapse entirely. The Broncos are the Broncos are probably the best defense they'll play the rest of the way.
Broncos are a good defense. That is a good defense, and you have to go to Denver, which
that's
always
tough.
Sucks. Like, that's always the worst.
Yeah. Somehow I feel like this offense is played a lot better on the road. That's the only thing that gives me any like
3-0.
Yeah. So that's the only thing that gives me comfort. But Denver's one of the hardest places to play because of the elevation and all that. The Chargers are a decent defense for sure.
Yeah.
The Vikings, like, I don't know what to think about the Vikings defense. They were absolutely lights out, and they've given up 2 bad games now. So by the time we get to week 14, maybe we'll know more. But then it's like Raiders, Giants, Commanders, Panthers, all in the bottom 5 of the NFL defenses. So like, maybe you can just win shootouts the rest of the way. Like maybe you
Yeah.
can ride this offense to 10, 11 wins or more, and hopefully figure out the defense by the time you get to the playoffs. But it's a little bit dicey. But I think the takeaway is that like we don't want to just blow smoke up everybody's ass and say this team is amazing and they have no faults and like they're going to cruise to the playoffs. They have to. You can't ever cruise to the playoffs in this league. You have to keep iterating. And like to Zach Robinson's credit, he's doing that. We just need Jimmy Lake to get the memo. And maybe we need Raheem to put a little fear of God into him. Like, Jimmy, I'm gonna need you to get this shit going. And make some adjustments, make some changes. Maybe look at the stats. Check the stat sheet one time. I don't know what to tell you there, but in the year of our Lord 2024, people use stats. That's just the way it is. So,
and
yeah,
I do want to highlight something because I think you made a really good point in that they're giving up 4.4 yards per carry. They have the 5th most run plays run on them at the same time. And so I'm going to use Jimmy Lake's favorite word. It's happening by attrition. They're breaking you down slowly, and they're just taking what you're giving them. So like you said, it's really just some small tweaks. And if you can get the opposing offenses in less favorable third down situations, you'll be able to get off the field quicker and you won't be gassed. And those 4-yard runs won't start to turn into 8, 9, 10 over the course of the game. And you can keep things at least in front of you and manage it a lot better. But like you said, it's going to take somebody talking to Lake, and it's going to take Lake just accepting that, like, yeah, I need to like kind of dig into these numbers and look at what's going on and where can we make those small adjustments and improvements, because, they can only do so many adjustments, for the pass rush. But like we've said, in the run game, you essentially have an upgraded line and upgraded defense in terms of run defense. Mike Hughes is a much better run defender this year. D. Alford is still a good run defender in the slot. No, he's not great for those big nickel situations. But again, we're seeing them push him out of the box, and we're giving teams light boxes. We're barely in neutral box situations and things like that. So if we can just tweak some of the numbers and give our defense at least the numbers advantage, or at least give them an equal opportunity to compete in the run, then maybe we do see them, like you said, kind of get better and just get good enough by the time that if Atlanta is in the playoffs, you're at least not freaking out the entire time that the other team's just going to hold the ball and milk the clock on the Falcons. And that's how they lose this game, is the offense doesn't get to touch it anymore, because teams can see that we just have to suffocate this defense by running the ball like down the throat.
Yep. Yeah, we can't let teams get away with that. You could tell the Bucs wanted to do that. The Falcons didn't
Yeah.
really let them do it because the offense just, every time they touched it, they scored basically for the first half. But, yeah, that's basically the situation they're in. They need to get better. They can't really. I mean, I'm not suggesting they're going to rest on their laurels or anything. I mean, it's just like that. The same attitude that Zach Robinson's taken, where he basically scrapped the entire game plan after week 1. Like that offense, the offense has never looked like that again. Like that was like, we're going to run pistol. And then it was like, nope, never mind. Get that out. We're doing something else. And like, that's what we need on defense. And like, you probably don't have to make that big of a change. Like that was a drastic
change. And they still run pistol.
Yeah,
but it's like
you
said, it's about varying up your pitch. Like you can't just run pistol every time you want to run the ball, or just run traditional shotgun every time you want to throw the ball. But it's like, that's what we're seeing like happen on the defense right now.
Yeah, exactly. So have to do better there. But I think ultimately, this team can get better in some areas that could make this easier. And the offense, if the offense can just keep going, they're going to win. I think they're on track to win double-digit games. And that should be more than enough to win this NFC South, particularly with all the injury attrition the Bucs are taking. And, the Saints are basically a game or two away from having to pack it in. I mean, 2-6 now? 6 straight. Can we celebrate that for a moment? 6 straight. The most fraudulent 2-0. That was like the biggest tease start to the year. Like if I was a Saints fan, I'd be furious. Like 40 plus points back-to-back weeks. You just whoop these two teams and then just complete collapse, man. I mean, you love to see it.
It's been nearly 45 days since their last win. they're not going to get a win in the entire month of October. Yeah, man. The bill the bill finally came, and Mickey looked down, and they just can't pay their tab anymore, and they keep trying to move money around,
Yeah, they just
pull
extended
things from
Kamara
the Swiss
again.
bank account, pull things from the Catholic Church bank account,
Yeah.
and it's just not working out for them. They just can't keep doing this kind of Ponzi scheme, team building, cap management, thing anymore. And now you're saddled with Derek Carr. You've got Spencer Rattler, and you're staring down the barrel of a terrible quarterback class. And the 2 wins you got earlier this year likely are going to kick you out of like Cam Order shooter range, because I think they'll probably beat the Panthers later this year when they get Carr back. So they're probably going to, scrounge up like 4 wins, and you just get put in purgatory. And so, yeah, it's it's such a shame,
Sucks to suck.
but
Yep.
at some point it was going to happen. You couldn't kick that can down the road forever.
Yep. Such a shame. But we can just, we'll always have that this year. We can make fun of the Saints, and just to have their hopes risen and just dashed so quickly. Just, I couldn't have drawn it up better myself. So yeah. Love it. Love it.
They don't, man. I don't even see the Saints tweet about football anymore. I don't see Saints. They're out there being like members of their community on Sunday now. They're they're living their lives. Not even worried about football anymore. It's bad.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, it's, the Falcons are on the right track in the driver's seat of this division. They got past the 4-4 mark that they like. That was this is the time of year every year where they fall back and never recover. It's happened each of the last 2 years. This year they don't fall back. They sweep the Bucs. They get out to 5-3, 4 in the division. They're going in the right direction. You still got to win. You can't.
Yep.
Like, I don't think this Bucs team is going to completely fall apart. They got 2 tough games coming up, but you still got to win. You probably still need 10 wins to secure this division, but you're halfway there already. 8 weeks in, you're halfway there. So it's better to, not need to come up with 8 wins, in the last 8 than it is to come up with 5 wins in the last 8, which is where they're sitting right now. So, feeling good about this team and where they are, but need defensive improvements. But could be a lot worse. Could be the Saints. So you can always put that feather in your cap and be happy.
Yeah.
But happy to see this team having some success finally, and hope that success continues over the rest of this year. Tre'Shon, anything else you want to touch on before we sign off tonight?
Yeah, I think one, I think just continue to kind of stress that this team is improving every week, and I think we are seeing not everybody, not every lesson, but we're seeing most lessons being learned, and we're seeing them bounce back. This team came out flat against Seattle. They just weren't playing up to the level that they had been before that. They did not come out flat in this game. It was a very different start for them as a team, and that includes the Jesse Bates fumble to kick things off for the defense as well. Both sides came with that high energy, and were able to they were not going to let what happened in Seattle happen again. And so, I think when we look at them going into Dallas, I think it's in the back of their mind, hey, when we went into that Seattle game, we just came off a really big high. We came off that division win. We were feeling really good. But we got to lock in here, and we need to take care of business. And I hope that that's what we see. And I'm excited to hear you. And I'm going to talk about that later this week, because I know that's, that is a big game in terms of some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. We're talking about playoff seeding. We're talking about the first round bye. We're seeing both the Lions and Vikings. They're penetrable. These teams aren't, flawless. And, the Vikings, especially, we just watched Matthew Stafford, just undress Brian Flores' defense. And because the Rams were healthy, he just had he had his boys back, and it wasn't anything other than I'm gonna call out your blitzes, and we're just gonna beat you guys with my hot routes and my Puka Nacua, who's one of the best 5th round wide receivers you'll ever see. And Kevin and I were there when he ripped everybody up at the Senior Bowl in the first day, and then called it a day after that. And everybody was like, "Man, why isn't he practicing anymore?" And it's like, oh, man, we didn't realize, I guess, at that time what was happening. But yeah, it's it's a long season, and I think that we should feel good about where they currently are, because they're on pace for that double-digit win season that they've been thirsting after for a long time, and that playoff berth that they've been really, really desperate for, as we've been in a drought.
Yep, and with hopefully this can keep going in that direction, and we can get that here, because we're all just absolutely ravenous for that winning record and playoff berth. It's been too long, and even if we just get one home playoff game in the new stadium, that would be worth it. And that would be a great first step. Before you got to walk before you can run. Sometimes, and you got to get that first step to winning, get this team used to winning. And then, it's really rare that you just come out of nowhere and win a Super Bowl, right? Usually you got to fight for it, and you got to work on it. And that's what happened with that 2016 team. Unfortunately, we know how that ended. But, that team had playoff experience. They finally got there at the right time. You don't just walk in. And a lot of these players, need to get that experience. And I think this will be a good year for that. And a good first step for this Falcons team if everything continues in the right direction. So thank you guys so much for joining us here on Tuesday Takes. He is Tre'Shon Diaz at Tre'Shon. I'm Kevin. I have Falcaholic. Kevin, like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Check out the Patreon if you want to support the shows. Patreon.com/Falcaholic Live. Join the channel memberships on YouTube if you're a video enjoyer. We'll be back on Wednesday night for Falcaholic Live with hopefully a special guest. We've been working on this one for a while. We're hoping we can get this one done. But we will see you guys there regardless. And yeah, we'll see you next time, as we got a date with the dysfunctional Dallas Cowboys. How do you like that alliteration there? Coming up on Sunday. Hopefully the Falcons fare better in this home matchup, coming off that big emotional win than they did last time, because this win would be big. This is one of their, on paper, one of the tougher games left on the schedule. So just pray for that Dallas dysfunction to just keep on going for another week here. And Falcons can come out of there with another win, get to that lovely. You always love to double up the losses in the win column. Get to that 6-3. That just feels good. You love to see it. So we'll hope for that, guys. But thanks again for joining us here on Dirty Birds and Brews. We'll see you next time. Have a great day, folks.